and tried the balance. "Man, this even makes that Colt Magnum of mine feel light," he said. "Say, Jeff, if Farnsworth's going after Gillis, it's probably on account of those stories about him and Mrs. Rivers. At least all that stuff would come out if he arrested him. Maybe we could get a fee out of Mrs. Rivers." "I'd thought of that. Unfortunately, Mrs. Rivers had a very convenient breakdown when she heard the news. She is now in a hospital in New York, and won't be back until after the funeral. Prostrated with grief, or something. And this case is due to blow up like Hiroshima before then. Well, we can't get fees from everybody. That, of course, was one of the sad things of life to which one must reconcile oneself. I got a call from Pierre Jarret. Tip's staying at the Jarret place tonight. I thought it would be a good idea to have him within reach for a while." The private outside phone rang shrilly. Ritter let it go for several rings, then picked it up. "This is the Fleming residence," he stated, putting on his character again. "Oh, yes, indeed, sir. Colonel Rand is right here, sir. I'll tell him you're calling." He put a hand over the mouthpiece. "Humphrey Goode." Rand took the phone and named himself into it. "I would like to talk to you privately, Colonel Rand," the lawyer said, "on a subject of considerable importance to our, shall I say, mutual clients. Could you find time to drop over sometime this evening?" "Well, I'm very busy at the moment, Mr. Goode," Rand regretted. "There have been some rather deplorable developments here lately. The butler, Walters, has been arrested for larceny. It seems that since Mr. Fleming's death, he has been systematically looting the pistol collection. I'm trying to get things straightened out now." "Good heavens!" Goode was considerably shaken. "When did you discover this, Colonel Rand? And why wasn't I notified before? Are there many valuable items missing?" "I discovered it as soon as I saw the collection." Rand began answering his questions in order. "Neither you nor anybody else was notified, because I wanted to get evidence to justify an arrest first. And nothing is missing. Everything has been recovered," he finished. "That's what I'm so busy about, now. Getting my list revised and straightening out the collection." "Oh, fine." Goode was delighted. "I hope everything was handled quietly, without any unnecessary publicity? But this other matter, I don't care to go into it over the phone, and it's imperative that we discuss it privately, at once." "Well, suppose you come over here, Mr. Goode," Rand suggested. "That way I won't have to interrupt my work so much. There's nobody at home now but Mrs. Fleming, and she's indisposed. We'll be quite alone." "Oh, very well. I think that's really a good idea, much better than you coming over here. I'll see you directly." Ritter was grinning as Rand hung up. "That's the stuff," he approved. "The old Hitler technique. Make them come to you, and then you can pound the table and yell at them all you want." "You go let him in," Rand directed. "Show him up here, and then take a plant on that spiral stairway out of the library, just out of sight. I don't think this is it, but there's no use taking chances." He mopped his face again. "Damn, it's hot in here." 10 minutes later, Ritter ushered in Humphrey Goode and inquired if there would be anything further, sir. When Rand said there wouldn't, he went down the spiral. Just as Rand had expected, Goode began peddling the same line as Varcek and Dunmore before him. They all came to see him in the gunroom with a common purpose. After easing himself into a chair and going through some prefatory huffing and puffing, Goode came out with it. Did Rand believe that Lane Fleming had really been murdered? And was he investigating Fleming's death after all? "I have always believed that Lane Fleming was murdered," Rand replied. "I also believe that this murderer killed Arnold Rivers as well. I am investigating the Rivers murder, and the Fleming murder may be considered as a part thereof." "But what brings you around to discuss that now? Did you learn something since last evening that leads you to suspect the same thing?" "Well, not exactly. But this afternoon, Fred Dunmore and Anton Varcek came to my office, separately, of course, and each of them wanted to know if I had any reason to suspect that the tragedy was actually a case of murder. Both had the impression that you were conducting an investigation under cover of your work on the pistol collection, and wanted to know whether Mrs. Fleming or I had employed you to do so." "And you denied it, giving them the impression that Mrs. Fleming had?" Rand asked. "I hope you haven't put her in any more danger than she is now, by doing so." Goode looked startled. "Colonel Rand, do you actually mean that—" he began. "You were Lane Fleming's attorney and board chairman of his company," Rand said. "You can probably imagine why he was killed. You can ask yourself just how safe his principal heir is now." Without giving Goode a chance to gather his wits, he pressed on. "Well, what's your opinion about Fleming's death? After all, you did go out of your way to create a false impression that he had committed suicide." Goode, still bewildered by Rand's deliberately cryptic hints and a little frightened, had the grace to blush at that. "I admit it was entirely unethical, and I'll admit that, too," he said. "But, well, I'm buying all the premix stock that's out in small blocks, and so are Mr. Dunmore and Mr. Varcek. We all felt that such rumors would reduce the market quotation to our advantage." Rand nodded. "I picked up 100 shares the other day, myself. Your shenanigans probably chipped a little off the price I had to pay, so I ought to be grateful to you. But we're talking about murder, not market manipulation. Did either Varcek or Dunmore express any opinion as to who might have killed Fleming?" The outside telephone rang before Goode could answer. Rand scooped it up at the end of the first ring and named himself into it. It was Mick McKenna calling. "Well, we checked up on that cap-and-ball six-shooter you left with me," he said. "This gunsmith, Umholtz, refinished it for Rivers last summer. He showed the man who was to see him. The entry in his job book, make, model, serials, and all." "Oh, fine. And did you get anything out of young Gillis?" Rand asked. "The gun was in Rivers' shop from the time Umholtz rejuvenated it till around the 1st of November. Then it was sold, but he doesn't know who to. He didn't sell it himself; Rivers must have." "I assumed that. That's why he's still alive." "Well, thanks, Mick. The case is getting tighter every minute." "You haven't had any trouble yet?" McKenna asked anxiously. "How's the Whoosies doing?" "About as you might expect," Rand told him, mopping his face again. "Thanks for that, too." He hung up and turned back to Goode. "Pardon the interruption," he said. "Sergeant McKenna, of the State Police. The officer who made the arrest on Walters and Gwinnett." "Well, I suppose Dunmore and Varcek are each trying to blame each other," he said. "Well, yes. I rather got that impression," Goode admitted. "And which one do you like for the murderer? Or haven't you picked yours yet?" "You mean.... Yes, of course," Goode said slowly. "It must have been one or the other, but I can't think. It's horrible to have to suspect either of them." For a moment, he stared unseeingly at the litter of high-priced pistols on the desk. Then: "Colonel Rand, Lane Fleming is dead, and nothing either of us can do will bring him back. To expose his murderer certainly won't. But it would cause a scandal that would rock the Premix Company to its very foundations. It might even disastrously affect the market as a whole." "Oh, come," Rand reproved. "That's like talking about starting a hurricane with a palm leaf fan." "But you will admit that it would have a dreadful effect on Premix Foods," Goode argued. "It would probably prevent this merger from being consummated. Look here," he said urgently. "I don't know how much Gladys Fleming is paying you to rake all this up, but I'll gladly double her fee if you drop it and confine yourself to the matter of the collection." Even in his colossal avarice, that was one kind of money Jeff Rand had never been tempted to take. An offer of that sort invariably made him furious. At the moment, he managed to choke down his anger, but he rejected Goode's offer in a manner which left no room for further discussion. Goode rose, shaking his head sadly. "I suppose you realize," he said sorrowfully, "that you're wrecking a $10 million corporation, one in which you yourself are a stockholder." Rand brightened. "And the biggest wrecking jobs I ever did before were a couple of petrol dumps and railroad bridge." He got to his feet along with the lawyer. "No need to call the butler. I'll let you out myself." He accompanied Goode down the front stairway to the door. Goode was still gloomy. "I made a mistake in trying to bribe you," he said, "but can't I appeal to your sense of fairness? Do you want to inflict serious losses